What's up, YouTube? So, the Pixel Fold is finally out. I've got to use mine for a few weeks, and I've been looking forward to this phone for a few years. But I've seen a bunch of reviews on this device, and every review that I saw, bar like one of them, felt like I was watching an editorial or some story, and it wasn't really the review that I was looking for. So I'm hoping this helps somebody along the way. This is gonna be a little more of a conversational review. So I just wanna talk about the phone, the things that I like, the things that I don't like. And I wanna qualify my perspective, because I also acknowledge that my perspective is not going to be the same as everybody's. There's going to be some things that I like about this phone that you may not like, and vice versa. So I'm hoping by giving myself a little bit of a background as I talk about these things, you should be able to formulate your own opinions and thoughts based on that. And I don't want to sell you on this phone. I don't want to sugarcoat some things, because I'll be honest, there's some things I really love about this phone, and there are some things that I cannot stand. So I want to do this just like a regular conversation. So we're gonna talk about it. I've got a list of things that I wanna discuss. And for some context, I've used a folding device since the Galaxy Fold 2. I've owned the Fold 2, 3, and 4, the Flip, and then now the Fold, the Pixel Fold rather. I don't have access to a lot of the Chinese phones, and I just own a lot of phones. I used to buy and sell phones, and now for my day job, I work at a large technology enterprise company, so I do get some phones for free. Now, again, full disclosure, this phone was not sent to me by Google or by anybody. I paid for this with my own money. However, the Pixel 7 Pro was sent to me by Google for a completely different reason. It's not for phone reviewers. I'm not a phone reviewer. I just work in the tech industry, and I got to use this for some enterprise testing, and they gave this to me when it was all said and done. So everything else here that you've seen is gonna be, with my own money. But yeah, I wanna talk about that and qualify it. So we'll kind of get into that. Just, as we go, I really encourage you to think critically about some of the things that I say and understand my perspective so that you can come to your own conclusions. So kind of with that, I think the first thing that we have to talk about, and we'll kind of move this out of the way. I do want to mention though, the Fold 4 is going to be kind of like the elephant in the room, and we'll kind of reference this a lot because there are some direct comparisons that we do need to draw, I feel, because they're important. But kind of with that aside for a little bit, this has been my daily driver for the greater part of 2 weeks. I don't really use cases. I do have a leather skin on here, but I'll go ahead and just say it now so people who are wondering what my opinions are. This is my favorite phone that I've ever owned. I do have a lot of major gripes about this device, specifically with some of the software decisions that they've made, but this is my favorite phone. However, when we talk about this, we can't ignore the fact that the Fold 4 already exists, and then the Fold 5, the Z Fold 4 and the Z Fold 5 is down the horizon. And I want to bring this up eventually when we talk about pricing, because in my opinion, even though this is still my favorite phone, I think objectively speaking, this is still a better product. Now, it may not be the product for you, but when we eventually kind of go through like some stats and specs and stuff, on paper, this is still a better phone worth considering. So we'll get into that, but I do want to talk about the Pixel Fold. So from a form factor perspective, I love this thing. Something about like the outer display is exactly what I've wanted essentially since folding phones became a thing. When I got a hold of the Fold 2, the Z Fold 2, I always felt like the front screen was too narrow, and while the Samsung Galaxy phones have gotten better over time, this is incredibly, incredibly narrow. And I will say, I've gotten used to this front screen for a while, and honestly, after picking this device up, using it for 2 weeks, and then powering this on for the first time since using this, this is still an incredibly narrow screen. And it is nice for one-handedness to an extent, but just due to the way that applications work, having to do the little like phone shimmy up and down gets a little awkward, and then sometimes, you've just got to use two hands anyway. The thing about folding devices though is that oftentimes you're going to be using the front screen way more than you are going to be unfolding the device. I think in your day-to-day this is probably going to be used 85 to 90% of the time. And the thing that I absolutely love about this is that it just feels like a natural phone. It actually feels a little bit smaller than a regular phone, but I love that for two reasons. Reason number one, I've always felt personally that I've enjoyed using a phone more when it is wider and less tall. I know some people will firmly disagree with that. In fact, that's why you have a lot of modern smartphones that are significantly taller and still kind of keeping the same width, which is perfectly fine. That's just a preference thing. However, the big reason that I really love this is outside of the one-hand usability. When you open the device, I like having the folding aspect ratio kind of be like something closer to 16 by 9. It's just what I'm more comfortable with. One of the things about like the Galaxy Z Fold obviously is that this is significantly taller, and it really changes the way that you interact with the phone. Now this has its merits, and I totally understand why people like this. If you're the kind of person who goes on like Twitter and TikTok and stuff where there's a lot of vertical aspects, this is fantastic. However, for the things that I typically use my Fold for, so things like Trello and spreadsheets and some things from like my business, I don't find this particularly useful. Oftentimes I would rather have, a spreadsheet kind of going this way. So it really depends on what you use the device for. The other thing that I love that I'm just going to briefly mention, this is currently dead, but the Surface Duo is one of my favorite form factors of any device. There's some really awkward things about this that I will never recommend anybody buy this phone ever. Maybe for like a $200 e-reader, if you happen to find one on like Woot or on Swappa or something. But just as a daily driver, this is a terrible, terrible device that I love still, and I think it has a lot of really interesting use cases. But this was always a little too big, and this size for the Pixel Fold is fantastic. Now, a couple of other things, because I feel like with the screen, it's pretty obvious what some of those benefits are. But a couple of other things that I absolutely adore about this phone is this overall like size and the thickness. The Z Fold, when I first picked it up, was a chonker. It was a big phone. It still is a big phone, and especially if you're using something like, here's an iPhone. This is just my work iPhone. It is essentially two phones thick, which, it makes sense. But when you compare it to something like the Pixel Fold, let's see if I can get that. This is actually the camera bump. Even with the camera bump, it's still significantly thinner. If we go maybe this way, that probably helps a bit more. It's about like 3 to 4 millimeters thinner, and you can really feel that in the hand. And actually, one of the things that I noticed when I picked up this phone for the very first time was, holy crap, it's really thin. It's not Surface Duo thin. Like, this is impossibly thin to a fault. In fact, one of the biggest breakpoints was, let's see if my camera will pick it up, right here on the USB port. Mine's not cracked, but this will often crack because this is like a millimeter thick between each side. This is impossibly thin to a fault. This is like perfectly thin, and I absolutely adore it. So when I picked this up for the first time, the aspect ratio of the screens and then the overall like thinness of the device made a lot of sense to me personally. It really does feel kind of like a notebook in your hand. So like, like one of those little like, if you ever have like a passport notebook, one of the, what is it, Moleskines? The Moleskine, they kind of feel like that, especially with my little leather skin that I've got. I love it. I absolutely love it. It's my favorite thing about this phone, just picking it up and making me want to use the device. It feels really good. But that said, it's not perfect. I know some people love to clown on like the bezels. The fact of the matter is, if you haven't used a folding device before, the bezels, you don't really care about that much. The fold, the crease on the inside, you don't really care about that much. Like when you're using this thing, and it's kind of hard to show off on a camera, but when you're using this thing day to day, you don't really notice the crease. It's like when people talked about like the notch on like the iPhone 10. Yeah, it's fun to clown on, but when you own the phone and you're using it every single day, you're not gonna notice and you're not gonna give a fuck. So it's kind of similar when it comes to the bezels and the crease of the Pixel Fold. And I know a lot of YouTube reviewers will talk about how, this doesn't fold at 180 degrees and you have to kind of like bend it back. Nobody cares. Like nobody cares. When you're using this thing and you just open the device up, you don't care. Like I have literally never once thought about the 180. It's one of those things where YouTube reviewers will like to sensationalize it because, well, two reasons. One, it's just really good clickbait, but two, this is an $1,800 phone. You can't really ignore something like this for $1,800, and YouTubers have the right to be picky for $1,800 bucks. One of the things that I find interesting about this, I can't call it good or bad, we're just gonna call it interesting, is that while I do love the hinge and it is very Surface Duo-esque, there is no like springiness of the hinge, so wherever you fold it is wherever it goes, which is kind of nice and kind of interesting. So like obviously the Surface Duo is basically the same way. You can fold this at any degree and it just kind of stays. Oh, is there battery left in this? I thought it was dead. But with the fold, you kind of get that to a point, and then at some point it just kind of like latches open. Oh, this one didn't even open all the way either. But it kind of just like springs open, and once it springs open, it's open. And you can kind of do this, but what I often find is that like you can like click like that. You can just kind of move it a little bit, and then it snaps back into place. The reality is that using this like flex mode or whatever they want to call it on the Samsung devices kind of sucks on the fold, and it almost feels like a gimmick or a joke, and it realistically is a gimmick. The only time I've ever used this mode ever is when I'm laying in bed and I want to watch a YouTube video in bed, because you know now it's like sideways with me. I will say the Pixel Fold is a lot better, both because of the aspect ratio of the screens, but also because it's not going to snap directly in, well, balance issue. It's not going to snap directly, you know, open. Like this thing, I have a very large fear that it's just gonna open like that. And it does quite often. So that's the other part though. The build quality and the firmness of that snap, that's more confidence inspiring when you open and close the device. Like you can hear it. And I think that's pretty good. Like that feels closer to something like a Duo. And that's fine. Sorry, this thing is trying to boot into Windows right now. This is fine, but there's just something about the hinge mechanism that is sturdy, and I can't quantify this that great into words. It's sturdy, but it doesn't have that kind of like spring action that makes it feel like, bam, this is a tablet. I do often feel like I am holding a book, and there are times too where like I'll open it kind of like this, just as a result, or it is kind of in like book mode. And that's fine. It's just something to be aware of. I do have concerns about overall longevity of the hinge, not the hinge, sorry, the screen. And my phone, here, let me do this. I'm trying to capture it here, but like, I'm afraid that dust might get in here. We'll see. So far, it's been fine. I do take these to the gym to go rock climbing. And if you guys know anything about rock climbing, your hands are covered in chalk. And I don't use these with the cases. I've never used any of these phones with cases, and I bring all of these, including all of my folding phones, to the gym, and I'll open them up, and sometimes I'll have a spreadsheet open, and I'll be reviewing stuff. My cat just went crazy, sorry. But sometimes I will be reviewing some things, like looking through spreadsheets at the rock climbing gym. So far, all of these phones have held up. Maybe in 6 months' time, I might be singing a different tune, but just kind of, you know, something to think about. But overall, I like the form factor of the device. I kind of wish that like all folding phone and this is totally a me thing because I don't use a case. I do wish that like all folding phone manufacturers would stop with this whole like slick piece. The Fold 3 had like kind of a matte black texture. It was like a satin texture, and it was really nice because for people who don't use cases like me, it's less like slippery on this side, but that is so inconsequential. A lot of people are gonna throw cases on there, and that's just being a little nitpicky. I will say, actually, while we're talking about form factor and the build quality, this is just a thing with like the current generation of Pixels, including the Pixel 7 Pro, except I don't really use the Pixel 7 Pro that much outside of like work. So this thing typically stays in an office and it just kind of sits on a desk. However, this thing scratches like crazy. And I have a little glass protector on that I just put on like this morning that just came in. And I can't really capture it with this. You can't really see it. No, you can't. But there are a crap ton of micro scratches, and ultimately it's cosmetic, but I have not been super harsh with this device. Like, I will set it down on a table like this and it'll scratch. I will set it down at my office desk, my cubicle job where I send emails and deal with laptops and phones, and it'll scratch. Everything, if you look at this the wrong way, it'll scratch. So if that bothers you, make sure you get a case, make sure you get some kind of like protector or something. For the most part, it's fine, but it drives me insane. So just kind of be mindful of that. But yeah, overall, that's everything build quality that I like. Oh, and actually I lied. One more thing, button placement. It takes a little bit of getting used to. I don't think it's bad, but if you're used to more standard devices where like the power button is like toward the bottom and the volume is up top, here the volume is up top. You will probably accidentally hit like here. I just hit the volume down button while opening the phone. It's fine. You get used to it. It's fine. But just something to be aware of. It's kind of like, you know, picking up like a new car or something. Like some of your buttons and dials and knobs might be in weird places at first, but you get used to it. I wouldn't call that a bad thing. It's just something to be aware of. Now, I do have to talk about some bad things. The thing that I hate, and I mean I hate about this phone, to a point where I thought I was going to return this phone, is the software. Holy shit, what were they thinking with some of these things? Okay. I'm trying to not make this a direct comparison of the Fold too much, but I have to talk about this. I have to, because there are so many decisions with the software of this phone that just seemed so questionable. And the first thing I have to talk about is the Pixel launcher. I hate the Pixel launcher. And I know before I go any further, some of you guys are already gonna say, well, you can change the launcher. Yes, with a caveat. And I want to talk about that caveat in a moment. But first off, the Pixel launcher, what the fuck were they thinking? What is this? It's the least customizable launcher I think I've ever used on an Android phone, which is crazy because it's Google. And I know, here's the thing. Can I say this? I work with Google and a lot of some of the Google like enterprise teams and whatnot, and I know that I don't directly interface with like the AOSP team that much, and I know that Google has various siloed departments, but this is atrocious. And I know they have their own agendas, they have other things going on, but okay, first off, let me just like move one of my applications real quick. Look how much like usable space is gone and wasted. I'm trying to not get my light in the way, but like I can't change much of anything. I have 4 rows and 4 columns I can use. I can't get rid of this top weather thing, by the way. I also can't get rid of this search bar anymore. Apparently in older versions of the Pixel launcher, you can, and I only get 4 applications. I'm used to 5, which is whatever. So that's already really annoying. I also can't change, again, I can't change the amount of columns and rows that I have. I can't change icon packs. It's so limited and cumbersome. And then another thing that I didn't think was going to be an issue at first was when you open your device, you'll notice this is my main screen that I was just on, and then this is a secondary screen. It's the same screen. It's just a second page, which is already a little annoying. And then of course, like the crazy part is they give you extra applications when you're in docked or when you're in unfolded mode. It's super annoying. On the Fold, you have one screen. And okay, keep in mind, I have gripes about the One UI launcher as well. It's not perfect, but it's a lot better. And then you have a different screen. This is a completely different screen. Like if I close this and I open it, I only have one screen. There's no other things going on. And I prefer it that way because the apps that I'm gonna fundamentally interact with on this, when I'm out and about and I wanna just like check my car or something, I'm gonna be using the front screen because I'm just gonna be, using it real quick. I'm not gonna be checking my car when I'm doing this, so I don't have my car app here. And I have different things. I have my spreadsheets and my Trello board and things that I'm gonna look at when I'm unfolded in full screen mode, because that's just how I'm gonna interact with the phone. And you can kind of mimic that on the Pixel Fold. It's just messier and it's cluttered and it's something that I personally don't like. If you're the kind of person that just throws all of your apps on the front, then you're probably not gonna care. But for me, I would like to keep things a little bit cleaner and I care a lot. And again, with the Samsung launcher, I still I want to be able to change icons for some apps on some pages some of the time. Now, if you're wondering, okay, wait. Why are you complaining about this? There are third-party launchers that you can use. In fact, like the Microsoft launcher is one of my favorite launchers ever. And I know some of you guys are thinking, oh, well, there's Nova launcher, there's Niagara, there's, Action Launcher sucks these days. But there's Lawn Chair and a bunch of others. And I've tested at least 5 different launchers on both of these phones. But here's the thing that you lose when you change to a third-party launcher on actually both of these, you lose the ability to multitask freely. So this is the Pixel launcher. What happens if I were to open, I don't know what I was looking at on the internet browser, probably Pokemon Sleep, yeah. I've been addicted to Pokemon Sleep, which is the silliest thing I've ever said, kind of ever. But okay, so here you're on Google, and you pull up this annoying dock, and yes, I think this dock is quite annoying. And let's just say I wanted to open up my car app. You can move it over, and great. Okay, cool, you're multitasking. Now, here's the thing. Let's say I were to switch launchers, because I actually tested this. I tested another launcher because I saw an article before making this video about some other launchers to use on the Pixel Fold. And I was desperately hoping, so this is the total launcher. I just installed it like literally 10 minutes before this video to see if it would work. I was hoping that I can pull the dock up, but if you look, the dock just goes away, and you can't use two hands to move things. If I let go, it goes away. And maybe this is an issue with just me and my phone, but I've tried this on Nova Launcher, I've tried it on Niagara, I've tried it on Lawn Chair, I've tried it on the Microsoft Launcher. They all do the same thing. And I find that if you if you reboot the phone, it'll work for a little while, but then when it detects that the Pixel Launcher still exists, it's like, oh, actually, you can't have this anymore. And that's really annoying, because part of the big sell for a foldable phone for me is multitasking, because I do like to multitask a lot. I like to have maybe like a work email or some other email or something for my business on one side, maybe my business Discord, and then keeping up with like my sales pages and stuff on another page, or maybe I'm goofing around and I'm playing Pokemon Sleep on one screen and then I'm actually doing work on the other screen. Like, there are things that I would love to be doing on here, and I would love to not. Here, let's not look at Pokemon Sleep. Oh, this is a flight. You know, let's just not look at my browser. There are things that I would love to be doing on, oh wait, let me change my home screen back, because that's so annoying. Where is it? Nice, let me talk about this. But there are so many things that I would love to just use other launchers for, but multitasking is such a big deal that these software companies have essentially disabled them. And the same thing goes for the Galaxy Fold. There's a dock on the bottom that is just straight up disabled. I don't even know what the last thing I looked at here. Let's just look at music. The Samsung has a dock on the bottom, which I'm gonna say is just infinitely better. It is miles and above anything that Google has currently implemented, because the fact of the matter is this doesn't eat up that much space. And here's the thing, you could argue it's because of the orientation, right? Like, if you do this and then you make a dock, obviously you're gonna eat up even more space. But the scaling of this, the apps are tiny in comparison, but they're still very easily accessible. This bar is more customizable, and it's easier to reach, because I don't have to do another like goofy motion and stuff. Because one of the things that makes multitasking good on a foldable phone, in my opinion, is the seamlessness of it. But the fact that I have to perform an extra action that realistically, you're gonna goof up. Like, the amount of times that I try to have this pull up and then I instead do this multitasking gesture is annoying. It's not great. It's really small and nitpickiness, but these are small software tweaks that have kind of already been solved, and they've been working very well, and they've been iterated upon for years. And the fact that both of these companies limit your ability to use multitasking unless you're on their launcher is quite frankly a pain in the ass. And then for Google to do it worse is super annoying. Now, I've gotten over it. That's the kind of the other part. Like, I've learned to live with it. It's fine. By the end of the day, I'm using the front screen significantly more, and I've just kind of dealt with this kind of, really messy, bloated screen. It's fine. It's fine. But I think the part that annoys me, that drives me insane, is that this is a non-issue for non-folding phones. And they're really small software tweaks that if you just use the phone for a while, you realize that the solutions on paper are easy. I say on paper because I don't work for Google. I don't know what their structure looks like. I have done app development before, and I have programmed and developed enterprise solutions. So I know from a coding perspective what goes on in the Android framework, because I work with that on a daily basis. But I also don't know what Google's like corporate plans are. So I'm sure there's a reason. I don't agree with that reason, but just kind of something to be aware of when you're looking into this. If that's gonna bother you, the awkward usability, if you like total customization and the freedom, the Pixel Fold doesn't really have, honestly, none of these folding phones do, but at least with Samsung, you get a little bit more. And I felt like that was incredibly important to bring up. Some of the other stuff I don't really want to get into yet, just from like like the specs and kind of the nerd shit, if you will. The Tensor G2 processor, it's fine. Honestly, in this day and age, most people love to talk specs, but like we're kind of at the point now where most smartphones, they're good, they're fine, it works, you're not gonna notice any issues. I don't have to worry about force closing applications. I don't have to worry about what apps I do and don't multitask with. I just use my damn phone, it's fine. I know some people like to talk about the Tensor G2 overheating. I have to be frank with the Pixel 7 Pro, I haven't used the phone enough to say one way or the other. My wife also got a Pixel 7. She uses that as her daily driver. Again, courtesy of Google, if we're just gonna be transparent. She hasn't noticed any issues with it. I haven't noticed any major overheating issues. I think the only time this phone gets like warm or hot for me is when I'm wireless charging, duh. And when I am playing Pokemon Sleep and also maybe watching a YouTube video at the same time for like 30 minutes or something. And not the best. Other phones definitely don't get as hot, but this does get slightly warm, not enough for me to really, really notice or really, really care. One thing I do want to talk about as well is just like my overall use case of this, because I'm going to talk about battery. The battery is not great. It's not atrocious. I wouldn't call it like terrible, but it's also not good. I use my phone slightly above average. Well, that's not always true. I'm kind of weird with my phone. Maybe during a busy work day, I'm not using my phone nearly as much, but on weekends, I'm using my phone a lot. So that means that my technical average screen on time for the battery nerds out there is around 4 hours. However, during weekends, it's probably closer to like 6, and then it's probably closer to 3 on weekdays where I'm doing like heavy office work and I'm on my computer more than my phone. So on weekends, I've definitely noticed my phone drop to like 15% before I go to bed. And then on weekdays when I'm at work and stuff, I usually end my day at like 30, 35%. So just kind of be mindful of that. The battery life is not great on this phone. It's not atrocious, but you may find yourself having to plug it in depending on how much you're doing and you know how much you're using this front or this inside display. I don't use the inside display a ton. I probably use it maybe 10% of the time, roughly. If you're the kind of person who thinks you're gonna be on this the majority of the time, the battery life, I'm just gonna be straight up with you, is probably gonna be a concern. So keep that in mind. For me, most of the time, my typical use case is I'm gonna be doing this, and then if I find something interesting, if I'm on YouTube and I see a cool video, if I'm on Discord or something and then I find that I need to do some work stuff, I open it up. But generally speaking, this is the main way I interface with the device. So yeah, battery, not great. The Tensor G2, honestly, it's fine. There are some concerns of like, hey, why am I paying $1,800 for a chip that's found in a $400 phone? That's valid. That's totally valid, because the hard part that I have kind of been, well, that's not true. I've mentioned it I've not been so subtle about it. This is an $1,800 phone. That's really hard to sell people on, especially when you consider the fact that the Fold 5 is coming around the horizon and it's also $1,800, which means that the Fold 4 that you can get, honestly, you could already find this thing in mint condition for $900 if you go on like Swappa, or if you go and find like a refurbished one on like Amazon, you could probably get it for like $1,100. This realistically should have been like $1,400 or $1,500. It's really hard for me to recommend this if I'm just going like pound for pound, because here's the thing. The Fold 4, if we just get form factor out of the way now, because again, I really like the whole kind of like wider screen type of deal, but the Fold 4 has a better battery. It has stylus support, arguably has a better chipset. It has a form factor that, again, you either love or hate, but it has significantly better software that gets frequent updates that, honestly, the updates do quite frankly help. Google's updates have been less than stellar. If you guys have used like the Pixel 6 and the Pixel 7 in the last 2 years, do you kind of know what I'm talking about? I know Google owns Android and all, but like we can't ignore the fact that their updates have not been dog shit, to say the least. And there's a lot of just really nice like software tweaks. Is better. This phone has been out for a while now. Samsung has a lot of really cool accessories if that's kind of your game. And I don't know, it's just like using this phone, it feels like it is a complete package. I can't say that about this phone. It feels not like a half-assed package like this, but it feels like something that Google is like half prepared to abandon. Oh my God, speaking of half prepared to abandon, I didn't even talk about this one thing. I totally forgot when we're talking about apps. Another thing that drives me insane about this, to the point where I've considered returning is, let's say we open up Twitter. Twitter doesn't open up on full screen. It's not a full screen application. And the reason behind this, and I don't fully agree with this, but I understand where they're coming from, is that Google wants their app developers to take the time to support full screen or tablet experiences and the like. The problem is that you can't expect every app developer to do this, but Google has the Pixel Fold and their new Pixel tablet or whatever the hell it's called, and they want to showcase these applications on these new devices, and they're trying to nudge app developers to do it, because the fact of the matter is, if they don't have some kind of incentive, and honestly, I don't think they have really good incentives right now, but if they don't have some kind of good incentive for an app developer to spend the time and the resources to scale and optimize the experience, the user experience of these applications, they're not gonna do it. So they're kind of in this weird like chicken and egg problem where if they don't do it, the applications are gonna suck and nobody wants to use them on a large screen device, which to be frank, nobody really wants to do that anyway on Android. And I have my iPad over on the side, and like iPad OS is very well optimized for tablet experiences. But if app developers don't want to do this, then they're not going to, like, the apps are gonna look like this. And if the apps look like this, then Google needs to do something because their products aren't gonna sell. And I know Google is primarily a software company and they don't really delve into hardware and blah, blah, blah. But the fact is, this shit still sucks, all right? This still sucks. And what Samsung did is if I open up Twitter, where's Twitter? If I open up Twitter, Twitter just like scales into full screen. And if Google were to do that, then they are essentially saying, hey, app developers, if you don't scale your apps, who cares? And then they're right back where they started, and then they can't promote this whole tablet experience that they're trying to push. I know some of you guys are gonna say Android 14 is gonna make things a little bit better down the horizon, but fact of the matter is, Android 14 ain't here yet. And now we kind of hit this weird conundrum that Google has to figure out on how are they gonna make this experience not suck? Because if we look at something like Trello is optimized for a tablet experience. It works, it just straight up works. And this is fine. And this is how most apps should behave. But Trello has a very large team behind it. I mean, one would argue that like Twitter has a large team, but Twitter can't even pay their own rent. But if we look at some of the other apps, it's not gonna be fully optimized for this. And that's not necessarily the fault of the app developers, because why should they have to devote all of these resources into an experience that maybe 5% of the population will experience? Probably less than 5%. I'm including like tablets and yeah, whatever. But that's something to consider as well. If that bothers you, you know, keep that in mind. Like Samsung has figured this out, but Samsung also doesn't own Android, and they're not incentivized to make app developers change their ways. Samsung could just, you know, see apps for what they are and then do their thing. And ultimately, by the end of the day, I don't really hold, you know, loyalty towards any of this. I've mentioned before, like, this is currently my favorite phone. Just straight up, it's my favorite phone. But I have a very hard time, first off, I have a very hard time recommending folding phones, period, to people. And if they do want a folding phone, I think this is gonna be better suited for most people. The software just works. The build quality is more confidence inspiring, albeit, yes, a little bit clunkier, sure. This doesn't really feel like a Gen 1 product, but it feels like a Gen 1.5 product. It feels like a revision. This feels like a Gen 2 product, and it's still not perfect. Samsung's had the time to make this particular device what it is today. And again, I still have issues with this device, but it's a little bit easier for me to just make that recommendation. Also partially due to the price, because again, it's $1,800. Look, here's the thing. I get phones for free. I work with technology all the time. My job pays me very well. Most people are very fortunate just to be in my position here. And not even in a YouTuber position where they're just getting free shit every single time. But $1,800 is a lot of money. Just straight up, that is a lot of money. I don't care who you are or what's going on. The fact of the matter is that you can get this chipset in a $400 phone. And not to mention like the camera. I'm not a camera reviewer. I know I haven't really talked about the cameras that much. I'll be honest, I think the one thing that a lot of the big YouTube content creators do really well are those camera reviews because they're really dialed in. I just kind of talk in front of a microphone, and I will implore you, if the camera is important, that you go and watch one of those those videos that I'm not too hot about. At least watch their camera review portions. Short and sweet. Yes, this camera's really good. No, I'm not qualified to tell you about it. So yeah, I think with that, I've used a lot of these phones. I felt like there were so many things that YouTubers just kind of glossed over, and they didn't really do the review justice because this phone has problems. I love this phone. I'm going to continue using it from the day-to-day perspective, but it has problems, and it's really hard to ignore that a better phone exists, a better folding phone exists for the money, and quite frankly, better phones, period, exist for a quarter of the cost. Not this guy, but so yeah, that's it. That's everything I want to talk about. I know I'm kind of hitting like the 40-minute mark at this point. Let me know if you have any questions, if there's anything else that I didn't really talk about or discuss with these. Again, I'm not really a phone reviewer, but I wanted to have just like a heart-to-heart conversation with somebody out there who is asking themselves, why should I look at this phone? And what makes it unique. Maybe again, an $1,800 purchase decision is a big decision and you wanted to do a little bit more research about it. So that's it. Thanks for watching.